Shalom Aleichem. Today is Yom Hamishi b'Shabbat, Thursday, He B'Nisan, Tavshin Peh, 3rd of April 2025, B'Minyanom. Hilchot Teshuvah, the Rabbeinu Gadol Rambam, Zichrono Livracha. Hilchot Teshuvah, Perek Shelishi. Let us reread briefly Halacha Tethwa or Zayin, which you are able to see on the screen. Hamisha hen hanikraim minim. So you will recall that this statement of Rambam here follows the previous statement, the halacha preceding halacha Yod Dalet, where Rambam spoke about those Jews that do not have a helek, the olam haba. And the categories are as follows. He mentioned in that halacha Yod Dalet, minim, epicorosim, kofarim b'Torah, etc. We see the list here. And now Rambam breaks this down. So the specifics of the list are as follows. The first is haminim. Hamisha hem hanikraim minim. Ha'omer she'en sham Eloah we'en l'olam manhir. In other words, an ideologically motivated and adamant atheist. It should be noted, by the way, that there is no creator and no one in charge of the world. That is a definitive statement and claim. Not that anybody could ever have any proof of such a claim, but it's a claim. It's essentially an ideology. It's not a fact. You can't prove such a thing, and if you believe it to be true, has v'shalom. But it is a tremendously audacious claim for anyone to make, precisely because it cannot be proven. It is only an assumption, as opposed to an agnostic. An agnostic says, I don't know. I'm not sure. Maybe there is a creator, maybe there is not. Maybe he is in touch with this world, maybe he's not in touch. I don't know. It's a question mark for me. Again, has v'shalom, but a person who says such a thing is not exactly this definition that Rambam brings here. And therefore it seems, al pnei hadavarim, lichora, it seems that a person who is an agnostic, but who does not, with v'rov chutzpatho, but with great audacity and haughtiness, make such a claim that he obviously cannot know to be true, is not to be included in this category of amin. So it seems. Furthermore, Rambam says, a person who says, oh yes, there's definitely a creator, but actually there's 2 or 3 or whatever number of creators. In other words, this is standard Avodah Zarah. Most forms of Avodah Zarah make such claims or assume such things. There are many, 2 or more. Or he who says there is one creator, one God, as we mentioned last time. According to Rambam, such a position, such a view is a min, is to be considered minuth, even though This is not clearly stated anywhere in Chazal, and that is why the Ravad points out here that there have been many good, faithful Jews who were mistakenly of this opinion, and they should not be considered minim according to Rambam. The essential thing to recall here is that a min is someone who his belief system, his ideology, shall we say, it's better perhaps to use that term, his ideology is such that we consider him to be a min, not because of any specific action that he did, essentially because of his belief or his philosophy. וכן האומר שאינו לבדו ראשון מסור לכל, he who claims essentially the position of Aristotle and others in the ancient world, and very possibly today as well, that Olam Kadmon is the expression. In other words, a steady state universe, basically. The universe is just there, the world is just there, and always was there. And came into existence, or did not come into existence, it simply exists, and was not brought into existence by Hashem or by any creator. It exists in its own right. Once you make that claim, of course, then it doesn't even make very much difference if you claim there's a creator, or one, or two, or whatever you believe, because then the material world, the universe, the observed universe, the perceptible physical realm, is an independent player. It exists in its own right. And if that's the case, then you will naturally and you will inexorably be forced to adopt the position that miracles are impossible, which of course contradicts the Torah in many, many ways, because this is essentially the what is called in modern day philosophy materialism. Materialism views the world, or views the existence in purely materialistic terms. In other words, everything is to be defined in terms of material, that which is tangible, that which we perceive with our senses, and that reality has its own vital reality. It's not dependent in any way. It's not contingent on the will of a creator to bring it into existence or to maintain its existence. It has its own validity and its own legitimacy, so to speak. And that is also a position which cannot possibly coexist with the Torah. וכן העובד אלוה על זולתו כדי להיות מליץ בינו ובין ריבון העולמים. Someone who says, I believe in a creator, but when it comes to worship, to prayer, I turn to a intermediary along the way. This, of course, reminds us of various religions and sects An obvious example is Christianity, where their Thaluv, Yeshua Nothri, Shem Roshem Yirkov, is reported in their own book to have said that no one sees the Father except through me. In other words, there is only one way to approach the divinity or anything divine, and that is through me. And any similar system or sect, and all these are considered to be minima. Called Ehad Hamisha Elo Min.
Rabbi,
Yes.
in the beginning of this halakha, you mentioned that there's a distinction to be made between an atheist and agnostic, one who claims that there's proof that Hashem doesn't exist, Khalila, and somebody that says they don't know. Do you think it's possible to positively prove that Hashem exists, or is it something that must be taken on faith?
Excuse me. Belief in Hashem cannot be proven in any empirical study or mathematically or by any form of irrefutable proof in that sense. On the one hand, on the other hand, it is entirely true that it is the most natural and intuitive understanding of existence, which corresponds and aligns with our experience of reality. We know that nothing exists without cause, without reason, without a beginning. It doesn't matter what we're discussing, whether it's this computer in front of me right now, where no sane individual would accept a claim that it just is, without having been constructed or planned, etc., by someone, or whether we're talking about a piece of bread that the person wishes to eat. Everyone knows that a piece of bread did not spring into existence spontaneously, and the same therefore follows for everything and anything, atoms and electrons and muons and whatever it is, and energy. People say, oh well, it's energy, forms of energy. Oh, very good, fine. Where does the energy come from? There was a big bang. Well, what exactly went bang? In other words, none of these answers provide any answer at all. They are rather feeble attempts to claim exactly what Rambam says over here at the beginning of this list. So we'll say there was a big bang, or there was some event, or there was whatever claim there is, and there is not even complete agreement today at the present time in the world of physics about such things. In general, people need to understand that physics today is essentially in crisis. People have won the Nobel Prize for proving that the universe does not exist in a real local sense, which is the opposite of a materialistic perception of the universe. So what is it? How does it work? How do very distant particles communicate with each other affect each other over vast distances instantaneously without any time lapse. No one has figured this out, but they've decided that that is how it works, and people have won prizes for this. So it used to be that science and physics were entirely materialistic, and now they're not. How did that happen? Well, it happened because too many things were noticed and observed that did not make sense with a purely materialistic understanding of the universe, which basically means that no one understands the universe, which is not really surprising, because why would we? How would we exactly? You can understand that which you can do. You can understand that which you can conceive of. But something beyond your conception, something beyond our realm of understanding, is obviously going to be a riddle. So it is a riddle. People in the world of physics have been working on things like string theory for many decades, and the result is precisely zero. To the extent that some leading physicists today claim that this has been a huge error on the part of physics to engage in such things, and and billions have been spent on spinning these theories, and nothing has come of it. So now we should do something different. That's what they say, not what I say. So there is the fact that there is no rational explanation for a universe that simply exists. It's much more reasonable and rational if we're talking about that which appeals to human rationale and cognition. It's much more rational and reasonable to assume that, as with everything else, there is a source and there is a beginning for reality. That's in terms of logic. In terms of natural, healthy intuition, that is also what a human being naturally, intuitively feels and assumes, until you beat it out of them. If you beat it out of them for years and decades, by way of newspapers, television, books, movies, what have you, and confusing science classes given by confused science teachers, then you can eventually convince someone of almost anything. Just as you can convince a young man that he really is a woman and he needs to undergo some kind of diabolical operation, transition, or what have you. You can achieve almost anything by such means. So that's not really surprising. But the normal intuitive position of a human being is that there is a God, there is a creator, and a human being of anything other than the most primitive, perhaps, has a yearning, a natural yearning, to somehow connect with that power, with that being, with that reality. But all the attempts that you find in various works, philosophical works, again, such as Aristotle, if we take non-Jewish sources, or if you look in our own sources, all the attempts to prove by means of some kind of rational, logical argumentation, such as we find in Mivhar Ha'emunot V'Ada'ot of Rav Sa'adia Gaon, or Chavot HaLevavot Rabbeinu Bachya Dayan, or in Moreh Nevuchim of Rambam, etc. Those proofs do not convince anyone nowadays, I believe, of anything at all. And that, I think, is one of the main reasons that so few people nowadays study these books. Moreh Nevuchim, which deals with many issues, as for example, all the books that I mentioned, they spend some some of those books, some of those works deal with this question, and then they go on to other questions. So the other parts of the book are of interest to some people today, but that kind of argumentation is no longer fashionable. It used to be very, very fashionable to debate such things, almost reminiscent of debates in some of the Christian churches as to how many angels could be fit on the head of a pin and things of this nature. All kinds of strange debates they had with themselves, but no one will take such a thing, I believe, today very seriously. So, so when Rav Kook, for example, addresses this issue, he stresses the intuitive, natural inclination and assumption of a normal, healthy, non-bamboozled human being to assume that there is a creator, there is a beginning, and there is a source for everything. Or as Chazal expressed the thought, there is an owner or a master of the bira. Yes, manhig la bira. All right, we continue. So the next category was epikorosim. Rambam says here in Halacha Tetzain or Hef, שלושה הן הנקראים אפיקורוסים. האומר שאין שם נבואה כלל, ואין שם מדע שמגיע מהבורא ללב בני האדם, and therefore it follows, והמכחיש נבואתו של משה רבנו. If a person does not believe in the possibility of any communication and any imparting of knowledge or instruction from Hashem, from the Creator to human beings, then clearly he cannot believe in the Torah. And this is not because of a belief with regards to Hashem. It is not because of an opinion or an ideology with regards to Hashem. Nevertheless, it is a type of cop-out, because practically speaking, what's the difference between someone who says there is no Creator, there is no God, or a person who says there is, but he has nothing to do with human beings, and human beings cannot receive or know or understand anything at all from him or about him? Practically speaking, these positions result in a olam shel hefker, a world which is left to its own devices, and human beings are left to their own devices and may and therefore will act as they please based on their baser instincts. So this category of epicoros is someone who does not accept nevuah and hashgahat Hashem. So such a person says ha'omer, and by the way, that when we say here ha'omer, as Rambam said in the previous halacha as well regarding minim, ha'omer is not referring to a person stating something verbally with their mouth. Ha'omer refers to a firm and even passionate affirmation of a certain belief, of a certain ideology or philosophy or a certain belief. Not, and that's also goes back to what I said before, that it's not a person who says I don't know. That is not an affirmation of anything. That is simply someone saying I'm confused. I do not know. And in some ways, such a person is can even be somewhat respected for being honest. the person says, well, I don't know, I hear this claim and I hear that claim, and I've read this book and I've read that book, and I really am quite confused. I don't know. That's an honest and confused individual. A person who says, I know such and such, and this is the reality, and I insist that it is so, without, of course, being able to prove anything of the sort, that is already chutzpah lo mithluya. In other words, uncommon audacity. But the fact is, nowadays it's actually quite common. But people have to understand that it is not based on any ability to achieve certainty at all. It is simply a claim. And often it's a claim that a person is making because it serves their own purpose, whatever that purpose may be. Often it has to do with just not wanting to be told what to do, what not to do. The will of a person to live a life of hefkerut, as Chazal say with regards to Yisrael lo avdu Yisrael ha'eger, they did not worship make the golden calf. Ela kadei latir la'asman giloy arayot. In other words, to permit themselves various sinful actions, it is advantageous to make such a claim. So that's with regards to both minim and apikosim. We're talking about ha'omer. All these claims are definite affirmations of a certain belief, not just expressing the idea without being sure of it yourself, and also not really being sure oneself whether it is so or not. So an epicoros is someone who says en nevuah, and Hashem doesn't communicate with human beings at all. So a person might say the Torah is wonderful and outstanding and sublime and uplifting beyond words. But it was written by Moshe Rabbeinu, shall we say. It is not of divine origin. There was a very inspired person by the name of Moshe, and he wrote this very interesting, very unique document. That is not a min, that is an epicoros. What is the difference? In practical terms, the difference is almost non-existent in terms of the halachic ramifications of such a belief. But the concepts are nevertheless not identical. Which is a denial of hashgacha, that Hashem, there is a creator, and that is something I must accept because rationally cannot be otherwise, as we said before. So he's not a min, he doesn't say the world just exists, but this creator is so distant from the created reality which he brought into existence, he could not possibly be interested in or involved in this world. So again, practically, there's no difference between this position. The ramification, the outcome is much the same. A person who says there is no creator, there is a creator, but he is totally uninvolved, and he's not interested. And if you pray to him, he doesn't hear, and he didn't speak to you, he doesn't say anything to you, and he never will, and he couldn't care less about you. Well, practically, you've removed that creator from reality, the reality that you can perceive, and therefore it comes to the same. Kol ehad misher sha'elo epicoros, says Rambam. Of course, the term epicoros, or however you pronounce it, I don't think it's entirely 100% certain how Chazal or the Jewish people in ancient times pronounced this term. If it's epicoros or epicoros or apicoros or what have you, or apecoros, there are various opinions as to how it should be minukad, how it should be vocalized, but it all stems from the ancient Greek philosopher and dilettante Epicoros, who promoted exactly such ideas, that the best course of action for a human being is to essentially eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow we die. So just do whatever you wish to do. So that is, again, very appealing to some people, to many people perhaps, but it is not an acceptable position, and it of course leads to the outcome is too terrible to contemplate. שלושה הם הכופרים בתורה. So we have now a third category, which is known as a kofer b'Torah, koferim b'Torah. Ha'omer she'en ha'Torah me'im Hashem. The Torah is not from Hashem. Afilu pasuk echad, afilu teva achad. Even one pasuk or one word. Ima amar Moshe amaro mipi asmo, a person who says, again, as we said before, it's very beautiful and wonderful, and I enjoy studying it, and I even enjoy living according to its instruction and its teachings. But I don't believe it's from Hashem. I think Moshe or somebody else or a bunch of people put it together. Hare za kofer b'Torah. This is kefira b'Torah. Because as appears at the beginning of Perek Helek in Masechet Sanhedrin, a person who says, I don't believe in, I believe in Olam Haba, but I don't think it has any basis in the Torah, I believe it. So the Perush, that's miyuchas to Rashi on Perek Helek of Sanhedrin, apparently, I would say it's certain that the Perush that is printed as Rashi on the last Perek of Sanhedrin is not Rashi. So writes already a couple of 100 years ago, the Baal Diktukei Soferim, for example. It becomes apparent when you begin to look carefully at many of the Perushim in Perek Helek. So the Perush there, it states that it doesn't really interest us if a person says, well, I believe in this or that. If you believe because you choose to believe, because it makes sense to you, why should we be interested in what you believe, what you think, your opinion? The question is whether the Torah says such a thing, and therefore whether it's required and necessary and can be taught to people as something they must do. If that's just your opinion, well, okay, but that doesn't really have to interest us at all, and it doesn't interest anybody else. So, ha'omer she'en ha'Torah Hashem, or that Moshe amaro mipi asmo, הרי זה כופר בתורה. וכן הכופר בפירושה. והיא תורה שבעל פה. He who denies the Torah שבעל פה, והכחיש מגידיה, כגון צדוק ובייתוס. These are the two personalities that are generally referred to in Hazal, and therefore their followers were known as Sadokim and Baitosim. Sectarian Jews, sects that existed in the time of Beit Sheni, that denied the teachings of Chazal, or what you might refer to in some other places as Hachmei Perushim, etc. This is also considered kefira b'Torah. והאומר שהבורא החליף מצווה זו במצווה אחרת, וכבר בטלה תורה זו, אף על פי שהיא הייתה מעם השם, כגון הנוצרים וההגרים, כל אחד משלושה אלו כופר בתורה. Here Rambam mentions explicitly those who say the Torah is from Hashem, or was from Hashem. And this is what the Torah meant, yes, as you say, but later, more recent revelation from this Creator came along and displaced this previous revelation. So who makes such a claim? For example, the Notharim, the Christians, who decided that the mitzvot, with a few exceptions, such as some of the Ten Commandments or things of that nature, are not binding or no longer relevant. And the Hagrim is refers to the Muslim, the claims of Islam, who make exactly this claim. And there's a difference. It is true there is a difference between the claims of Christianity and the claims of Islam. Christians accept the Tanakh as is, but they say a certain more recent, more updated revelation came along and nullifies part of the previous revelation. Whereas Islam claims that the Tanakh, the Torah, and the V'im are all forgeries and inventions of the Jews, and that the true revelation is their book, which is an even more extreme claim. And this is why Rambam writes in a Teshuvah that it is mutar to teach Torah to a Christian if you think it is possible that you can bring them around to the position that they must accept the Tanakh fully as is, not according to their own convoluted explanations, because in essence they accept the Tanakh, but they have their own interpretations thereof, their own strange additions and accretions. But essentially they believe in the Kedusha, and the sanctity of this set of books of revelations. Whereas those who do not, whether it be ancient Romans who worshipped an entire pantheon of idols and gods and what have you, or whether it is the Muslims who claim to believe in one God, one Creator, but reject the Torah out of hand, you cannot teach them any Torah, because they have removed themselves, divorced themselves from being able to accept anything from the Torah as it is, if it does not fit their preconceived notions. So such positions, such beliefs, and such claims are considered kafira b'Torah, because they do not relate to the nature of Hashem, or whether Hashem exists or any such thing. They relate to the Torah itself. Furthermore, you see now in Halacha Yod Het or Tet, Shanaim Hem HaMeshumadim. HaMeshumad La'avira Ahat VaHaMeshumad L'chol HaTorah Kula. The word Meshumad, which the Ramban writes in his Perush on the Torah, comes from the Aramaic word Meshumda. In other words, someone who is known to think or act in a certain way. In other words, we've become aware, and he's become famous, as it were. Another explanation for the word Meshumad is Milashon Shemad, which has to do with destruction or destroying. A Meshumad La'avira Ahat is a Jew who accepts all of the Torah, or so he claims, but the fact is that with regards to one particular aspect of the Torah, one particular mitzvah, he simply has decided that this does not interest me or speak to me, and I will simply ignore it. I will act as if it doesn't exist. This in some way touches upon what we discussed perhaps last time. Someone who never wore tefillin, for example. So the person knew there was such a mitzvah, but he decided it's not for him. So it could also be something quite different. It could be a Jew who every Tuesday afternoon for lunch he has to have as we said last time, a shrimp salad or something like that, or bacon and eggs for breakfast. That's just what he does once a week, and he knows exactly that the Torah. He knows very well that the Torah says it is asur, and he decides that for him it's mutar. That is a meshumad la'avira ahat. And you have something even much more serious, in fact, which is hameshumad l'chol Torah kula. A person who rejects all of the Torah and does nothing and accepts nothing that the Torah states, and therefore lives his life without any reference to the Torah or to Judaism. המשומד לעבירה אחת זה שהחזיק עצמו לעשות אותה עבירה בזדון. A person who habitually commits a certain act or transgresses a certain mitzvah, החזיק עצמו, in other words, it's a regular practice. This is what he does regularly. ונתפרסם בה והורגל. Here you see the word נתפרסם. He is known for this. So this is in keeping with what the Rambam writes, that it has to do with the word meshumda, which means known. So he is known for this position of acting muhurgal, and it is his habit to behave thus. Afilu hayatha min aqaloth, even if it's one of the not the most serious of aferoth in the Torah. Kiron shehuzak tamid lilbosh shatnez, a person who deliberately, not because he wasn't aware or because he didn't check, but who decides that shatnez is really not a big deal, and which of course refers to a garment in which you have both wool and linen together. So, which is if a person does so, he's hayav malkuyot. He's not hayav a more serious punishment. Not that it's not serious, but it's not a capital crime. But if a person decides, I will always wear shatnez because I happen to like that jacket and that's just how it is, or lahakif pe'ah, or a person who decides to deliberately cut his hair in the fashion of goyim, lahakif pe'ah, which is to shave the sides of his head, the pe'ot harosh, which are on the temples, and from his perspective, this mitzvah is non-existent. Such a person is considered meshumad, in other words, known, and habitually, regularly transgresses this aspect of the Torah. And this is on condition that what he is doing is lahachis. In other words, it's deliberate. B'sha'at b'nefesh, as it says in Sefer Hezkel. In other words, the person does so with complete deliberation and forethought, not because a person simply finds this particular activity pleasurable. So a person who eats a prawn salad because he just finds it extremely delicious, that is not a meshumad lahachis. That is a meshumad le'te'avon. Someone who simply allows his yetzer hara to lead him astray, even if he does this on a regular basis. In other words, he knows it's asur and he feels guilty about it, but he does it anyhow. As opposed to someone who does it lahachis will not feel. A person who is lahachis will not feel guilty. They will also say that it's mutar, and it's not a problem, and he will encourage others to do so, etc. That is Meshumad L'Avera Ahath. The other category is Meshumad L'Chol Torah. Someone who is considered Meshumad, in other words, who has rejected completely all of the Torah. Keron Ahozer L'Datei Agoyim B'Sha'a Shegozrim Shemad, such as a Jew who readily accepts another religion or denies the Torah when the Jews are being persecuted for religious reasons. Sha'at HaShemad, V'yidbak Bahen V'yomar, and joins them. He essentially turns his back on the Jewish people and joins them, the other side. Uma beth ali lidabek b'Yisrael. Why should I remain a Jew and be included in their number? Shehen shefarim v'nirdafim. They suffer and they are persecuted in this world, and it's not worth my while. Tov lo sheyidbak be'elu sheyadan takifa. It is better to join the opposition, so to speak. In other words, become a Roman or become a Frenchman or whatever it might be. In those days, it was always along such nationalistic, ethnic lines, because in the ancient world there was no such thing essentially as being an individual. A person belonged to a group. So you were either a Roman or you were a Jew. You being, as it were, an independent practitioner, living and existing and thinking entirely for yourself and in isolation from everything else going on around you, was not really an option. It didn't exist, essentially. Today, it's not so. Today, it's different. Because present-day Western society, over a period of generations, has become individualistic and atomized. A person can live, as it were, on a desert island, so to speak, allegorically and metaphorically, and decide that I'll just not be part of the Jewish community. But it doesn't mean I have to join a Christian community or any other group. I'll just be nothing. But again, being nothing, in other words, not being undefined, being unaffiliated, is also, today at least, certainly a kind of affiliation, because that is, so to speak, the state religion for many people within the current Western paradigm, which of course is crumbling, but it exists for the meantime, and therefore, if you say, well, I don't belong to anything, what essentially you do, you belong to the great fake stream world of nothingness. So that's also a kind of affiliation. At any rate, a Jew who simply finds it expedient to ignore the Torah, to deny his Jewishness, and adopt another identity or a totally different set of ideas and values, that is a Meshumad L'Chol Torah. And yes, usually such people try to insinuate themselves with those who are powerful, those who are wealthy, those who can bring them some benefit. What we see today, at the present time, in Israel and also outside Israel, from what I hear, but certainly in Israel, we see over the past year and a half since the beginning of this war, we see a certain change of heart, quite a definite change of heart, on the part of many Jews who, both in the past and also at present, would not define themselves as dati, as religious, but they have realized that they are Jewish and they must be Jewish, and they wish to identify as Jews. This is the only way to understand, for example, the phenomenon which I haven't heard it spoken of recently, but it may continue to this moment. I would not be surprised if it does. But it was certainly spoken of a great deal at the beginning of the war. Many soldiers who knew nothing about the Torah or about mitzvot, about Judaism, were interested in receiving talit katan with tzitzit. And you could ask yourself, why were they interested in doing this? If you want to all of a sudden begin praying to Hashem because you're frightened, well, that you can do that. You don't need tzitzit for that. And if you just want to show that you somehow identify with more religious Jews or with the Torah, you could wear a kippah. You don't need tzitzit. What the two things that many soldiers requested were tzitzit and tefillin, but even more tzitzit for some reason. And the explanation, I think, is that what is more Jewish, what is more obviously Jewish than tzitzit and tefillin? We'll take tzitzit for now. If you're talking about a kippah, for example, a skull cap, well, the Pope also wears a kippah, as do certain other, so do some Muslims. It's not uniquely Jewish. Tzitzit is uniquely Jewish. You will never find a person in the world walking around with tzitzit if they're not Jewish. At least I don't think that I've ever seen such a thing, and I doubt that anyone else has. Or wearing tefillin. What I'm getting at is as follows. It used to be the case, if you go back decades, that you always had those who were dati or haredi, shall we say. In other words, they were Orthodox Jews. However many distinctions and differences there are between the various streams and groups. And you had those who were described as Hilonim in Israel. Hilonim means secular. And you did have many people who were considered, who may have described themselves as Masorti, traditional, which means they would observe certain aspects of the Torah. But the fact was that over time, for obvious reasons, because the Israeli society was very secular, and there was a very deliberate attempt, and it was an official policy to cause such people to become openly and steadfast chilonim, and not have anything to do with traditional Judaism. So essentially, that middle group, which was actually the majority, at least half of the population, shall we say, if not more, they were essentially lumped together and could be considered as one with the chilonim. Certainly in political terms this was true, and in many other regards. What has happened over the last few decades, and very clearly and very specifically over the past year and a half, is that many such Jews, there are also Jews who are considered hardcore chilonim, secular, who are beginning to sing a different tune now. They're all of a sudden more interested in hearing something about Judaism, about the Torah. They're less anti than they used to be, or not at all anti any longer, in fact interested. And there are many other Jews who were always traditional to some extent, but it was more or less swept under the rug, and it was not something that you spoke about in polite society, so to speak. You never know if the person listening to you would be pleased or interested or impressed to know that you thought this or did that. And now it's things are changing. Many Jews in Israel are much more openly, willingly, even enthusiastically embracing their Jewishness. Different people express this in different ways. Not everyone becomes a Baal Teshuvah, Hozer b'Teshuvah overnight. But there is definitely a shift. This is an interesting and important point to note. There has been for decades again, but it's a process, a drawn out evolutionary process. But it has most definitely been speeded up by recent events.
The temple patches are also part of this phenomenon?
Yes, I believe, no question. I believe so. Yes, absolutely. It's well known, for example, and this has been going on for many years, even decades, that in certain moshavim and kibbutzim, where it would never have occurred to the founders who founded these yishuvim, these kibbutzim, shall we say, 100 years ago, or 90 years ago, or 80 years ago, it would never have occurred to them that would be a functioning Bet Knesset, a synagogue within their kibbutz. They were opposed to such a notion completely. And today you can find a functioning Bet Knesset, which opens up on Shabbat, and people come to. Maybe not, obviously not the whole, probably not the whole kibbutz, and maybe it's not packed solid, but there are people interested who come, and they had to very often fight the authorities and their fellow kibbutznikim to even set it up, to get it running. But it happens, it exists. And throughout the country there are many, particularly on Yom Kippurim, also Rosh Hashanah, minyanim that are set up in all kinds of community centers and school buildings, what have you, for a general wider public that does not frequent Batei Knesset, synagogues. But they do want to come to such a thing, and this was not the case way back. Then, if you wanted to experience some kind of tefillah on Yom Kippurim, you had to go to a Beth Knesset, you had to go to a shul, and things are changing. And this, of course, bothers greatly. The old guard, those whose ideology was and remains that we should be Am Kechol Ha'amim, a nation like all others, and we should embrace a complete rejection of the Torah, Has v'Shalom. And this is, in fact, the next category that Rambam discusses, which we'll discuss next time. Mahtieh Harabim, those who cause the people, the masses, to sin. In other words, who lead others astray. In other words, they are ideological Jews, or so to speak. That is to say, ideological Jewish and ideologically motivated non-Jews. In other words, they want to be non-Jewish in every possible way, and they regret and resent even their Jewishness, and they did their best to suppress it and hide it and deny it. Well, now it's been going on for a number of generations in most cases. But things have not been going their way for many years now, and this bothers them very greatly. And this also explains some of the political events and upheavals that we see today. And that's a good sign. It proves it shows that they know they're on the back foot. They're not doing very well. A large number of people in Israel today see that the supposedly avant-garde, intellectual Ashkenazi secular left has nothing to offer. Decades ago, many people believed that they had a tremendous amount to offer. And this is no longer the case. There are those who are, true believers in that system, and they will continue to be so. But many today are turning their back on that world, on that entire milieu and stratum of Israeli society. So these are positive developments, and B'ezrat Hashem, we hope to see these things evolve further in a positive direction and come to fruition. We shall stop here for today. Hayu Baruchim, Hizku Yamas Levavchem, Kol HaMeyahalim Ladonai. Shalom, וניסחון על כל אויבינו מבית ומחוץ. בשורות טובות, ישועות ונחמות, וממילא נחמות.